This is Remnant from the Ashes. It's basically a Dark Souls-esque shooter with bits of melee action thrown into it. So this is sort of the starting hub area. This is where you meet the citizens. They kind of pull you out. They save you when you first kind of end up in this area. That's really kind of as deep as the actual narrative elements go. Not to say that there isn't a story that does follow, but it's just a fair bit lighter as you progress further in the game. So you can chat with these people, and then you're able to buy things and sort of get new items and everything like that, which will make your character a bit stronger. Again, this is just the general little open hub area that kind of gets you going. It's the start place of your adventures. And then you go to this magical crystal, and then you're able to move to new areas and unlock interesting things, particle effects. Great, so here we are in sort of the second main area. You travel to a few different magical sort of weird locations. You start out on Earth, and then you progress from there. So this is Xbox One X Enhanced. We're getting a push towards a 4K resolution with no HDR support. So this is a third-person sort of action game. You can play it alone, or you can do co-op for up to 3 players. And it's a lot easier in a cooperative setting. I actually find it fairly difficult by myself, but you know, there is a mix of challenge as opposed to being too ridiculous. I do find some of the boss enemies to be a bit ridiculous, but you know, it's really about finding out what the weaknesses are and dealing with that. So we've got our first little battle here, and we're going to continue talking. So this is an interesting sort of title. I like the visual style of it. I think it's very appealing. It's got a sort of nice destroyed, desolate look to it, which is kind of cool. And there are a lot of different sort of weird, scrounged together weapons that you are able to collect as you roam around. You're just kind of taking care of this group. So we have this like editing system. So you got your character here. You can put mods on your gun, change things up. There's different types of armor you can have. You can also have different skin types for your armor. You can go back to your main base, and you can enhance the armor and weapons you have. You get consumables, materials for editing and enhancing and modding things, and quest items too. Then we have the trait system. So the traits you unlock, they're kind of like your skill points, and they make you stronger. And you get new trait options as you progress. You've got a map that kind of lets you know where you're going. The game is largely linear in design, but it's interesting. So this is what is a dynamically generated world. So each time you play it, it's different. So there's 100 varieties of enemies, deadly enemies, and 20 epic bosses to battle as you run through here, collecting new weapons and items and everything to deal with these enemies. So you can kind of like melee, you can use your guns, they're class options when you first start out, so you get to pick things, and then you get to, you know, specialize and upgrade as you progress. Again, being Dark Souls-esque, you're gonna have to use your stamina meter. Whoa, these guys are tough. And watch your health. So you've got these little hearts that can heal you up, but you gotta be careful because you gotta time things right, otherwise they won't go into effect. Wow, these sticks are powerful, eh? But you get some pretty cool looking enemies. They do feel somewhat repetitive. And with that sort of dynamic generation, honestly, the environments you go through feel a little bit bland. I know that's an odd thing to say. I do quite like the game. Honestly, I think it's quite neat. And I say the bland aspect as it's a world that really wants to be explored, if that makes sense. And you're going from point A to point B. I don't have to fight in these enemies. I could just run by them. That's not a huge problem. And I don't really get a point of fighting them in these areas, because aside from like collecting some scrap and loot so that I can enhance my equipment and everything like that, there's not really anything to find, or it's very rare that you do find anything neat or lore worthy. So in a type of world like this, you'd be like, wow, this is, you know, striking. It's beautiful. I want to go into these houses, and I want to look for, like, you know, some collectibles or some sort of more context into the narrative. And that's just not something that's present. I don't think it detracts too much from the overall experience, but it's something I want to mention because it it kind of really makes me beg for like wanting to know more about this world and wanting to see more of a purpose for the exploration. But yeah, you're largely going from point A to point B, killing the various enemies along the way. Then you'll deal with like a short little cinematic that doesn't really tell you much, and then you fight a boss and you go on to the next area, and that's really all there is to it, which is kind of fine because I know some people really like the style of challenge, this sort of hardcore type death game. I personally don't care too much for the genre that has shown up over the years, but I know a lot of people like it. I do actually find this game rather fun. Some of the boss fights were a little bit frustrating, as to say, but then you find that flow and you're like, oh, okay, I can handle this fine. It just wasn't doing things quite the right way, and then it doesn't become too difficult. An example is a giant fire-breathing dragon thing. I just needed to do more close-based combat as opposed to distance, and it would have been easier. There's also a neat sort of system, so you see the bleeding pop up. That's something that's actually rather common in this. And you get other effects, like you can be lit on fire, and then you have to roll combat-wise in order to dodge it. Radiation effects. And you see it kind of just like eating away at your health. Jeez, these guys are bothering me. Oh yeah, we get these checkpoint stones, which we can't hit because there's enemies nearby, so that's not fantastic. I do wish there was a deeper focus on the narrative in this one. I know there's a story here to uncover as you play through it, but it's kind of like almost too mysterious for me, because I really do enjoy, intense narrative-driven sort of experiences, and they don't really take that very far. It's always hinted at, but it's not necessarily there. So we get these checkpoints and they replenish things for us, which is kind of cool. Like, I'm just like passively bleeding. It's not even a big deal. It's like whatever. So yeah, you just specialize, and again, it's much easier when you've got like a squad working with you. I'm just gonna continue moving along here. But yeah, it's like you're the last of humanity's or finest, I don't know, people or something. You're in a place where things aren't good for humans, and you've got to fight a bunch of monsters and sort of find the source of this corruption, as to say. Again, this is just an example of one sort of fantasy setting. Humans, we have the ability with these portals to visit these otherworldly locations. That first area, the first big section, you start out on Earth, and then you get to see some more crazy, fantastical places as you progress along, which is kind of cool. And this is like a multiplayer-focused title, so this is a public match. People could join in. We are kind of in a pre-launch at this point, so, people aren't able to do that, but you can search and kind of set up matches with friends. Well, that's what I've been doing. And yeah, that's how I've been trying out other aspects of the game. And it's just a little bit easier to work with other people. Jeez. Because you do get a little bit overwhelmed when you are by yourself in this one. I do like the vaulting and everything. I think that's kind of a nice touch. But yeah, you're going to get a sort of sense of difficulty in this one. Just in regards to stamina cost, -1%. What you have to deal with, how you level yourselves up, how you build your class is important. You want to keep improving your skills and becoming more deadly. I do notice some little glitchy things like that, where they can hit you through walls. And then one boss fight is a little bit frustrating because the dragon one, because that's the most frustrating one, really, in my opinion, for some reason, even though it wasn't too bad once I got the hang of it. It was getting like clipped through walls and stuff, which kind of gets a little bit annoying in my opinion. But yeah, a lot of it's combat rolling, using your stamina correctly, accessing your special skills on the bottom left there. We get a really beautiful minimalistic sort of HUD that I really enjoy. I think it's just very visually appealing, and it's got that really nice destroyed apocalyptic style to it, which is really cool. So yeah, we're in this area now, and we're going to kind of push through it. So again, you get the sort of challenge of the game, that almost like roguelike situation where you can come back and replay it, because the game does have content afterwards. You really can experience the game almost through a whole new sort of way, as you won't experience all of the content through your first run, which adds a little bit of extra value to things. There are the 4 core sort of environment worlds that you're going to visit, with this being the second location. I picked a spot I think really doesn't spoil anything story-wise, and kind of gives you a good idea of what to expect. There's a really neat combination with the actual combat and the variations within the enemies. I like that you can mix and match your sort of battle situation, right? I've got a shotgun and a pistol, you might have like a rifle and a pistol, and then you've also got that extra melee option. So you really can cover all your bases in regards to switching up weapons and dealing with different enemies that attack from like different perspectives. Some like to shoot at you, some like to get up close in your face, and it's always something a little bit different. It can feel a little overwhelming when you're by yourself, though, like I mentioned, and that can be tiring. This really does feel like something that was meant for a cooperative experience, but you can do it by yourself. It's just, going to be a lot more of a challenging and trial time. But it is easy to sort of matchmake. If you want to just join in somewhere else, you can do that, or you can host your own game and just make it public. If that's something you want to do, those options are present in the game. Yeah, that definitely challenges you. I think, issue-wise, some slight things where enemies will hit you through stuff. Kind of annoying, especially during that dragon situation I had. Bam, there we go, nice. I will say it could potentially get a little bit repetitive just due to fighting the same sort of enemies, and then having to deal with situations if you die and restart the same area multiple times as you're walking along to get to the next point. You'll just feel like you're not really accomplishing much, which can be annoying for some. And I don't think it's necessarily a game for everyone, because it does fit into that Souls niche style of gameplay. But I think it's a little bit more action-packed than what that normally provides. And blast this thing. Whoop. Jeez. Yeah, these things are giving me a hard time here. I'm not going to dip into my secondary things. I'd rather just die and come back and do this again, because that is just actually part of the gameplay experience, is dying and having to redo things. Normally, I would actually just run by all the enemies, but I want to show off that I'm actually battling things. I find these segments very boring, personally. I see, the value in having this so that it pads your game time between the bosses and everything like that. But it's like, I come in here and I shoot the same things over and over again. Not for me. But I do see the perspectives of others when they are playing this type of thing. Ooh, a glowing rod. How exciting. Yeah, I think the environments are really well done too. I love the look of them. Like the earth level, it's got like a very sort of overgrown plant redness to it, which is neat. Seeing these desolate streets and everything like that was really cool. And you get to see bosses that sort of match that setting very well, which is cool. And this one, again, jumping out to the more mystical side of things. But overall, it's a good challenge. I mean, you're going to get a lot of gameplay out of this if you actually work through it all. You'll find some quality time while you play it. I think the environments offer some good distinction between them. I mean, there's quite a lot going on in the world, so you can shoot things and take out enemies and fight bosses and customize your class as you continue to progress and gain access to new tools and try to survive along the way. Oh, come on. Am I right? And yeah, that's generally what Remnant from Ashes is. It's something that doesn't exactly focus on the narrative elements. It has some variation within the gameplay because you're seeing new environments. If you come back and play it, you can replay it and enjoy that. It really is sort of run in there, fight things, or run past things, doing what you want. Watching your stamina, dealing with the enemies, managing your sort of side skills. It's not too insanely hardcore. The cooperative elements are more fun and enjoyable than doing this as a single player setup. But you can play it by yourself. It's not too insanely difficult to get into. And I think it does sort of hit a niche audience fairly well. They'll like this sort of thing. The bosses are really well done in terms of like their look. Every area feels special when you are fighting them. And I think that's going to be enticing for some people. There we go. I have generally enjoyed my time with the game. I don't really care for these types of titles that much. Jeez. But yeah, it definitely can perhaps be a frustrating time as you deal with a bazillion enemies. Get that fire mod going on. Ooh, that's toxic.